Thanks again, everyone, for joining. This webinar is hosted by our entity security, and Donny Murray, our lead for tech sales and consulting group, will present our topic, and I'm leaving the word to you, Donny.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Marcus. We have a full house here today. Thank you for joining, everyone. So I'm just going to talk through over the next 30 minutes a little bit about protecting critical operations as IT and OT converge. So, of course, a very interesting topic in today's day and age.
And if you have any questions on the way, put them into the Q&A, and I will make sure that those get moderated and brought up in the end. Thanks. Continue.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcus. So a little bit about who I am and where I'm coming from. So I'm working with NTT Security. I'm heading up our security consulting and sales engineering team here in the Nordics. I come from a technical background, working within security operations, working with managed detection response, actually starting out as a security analyst. So our marketing team, Marcus and co, they love to use actual pictures of us working in the SOC. So here's a picture of me on the right-hand side. Back in my analyst days, actually working with the real-time analysis. When I'm speaking at conferences, I'm told that I'm often remembered as the quick detection and rapid response guy. So let's get started with the current situation as I see it. So I am heading up the sales engineering team. I get to have a lot of interesting conversations with organizations we're already working with, but also organizations that want to hear more about OT security in general. We hear a lot about NIS2, for example, coming. We're seeing within the threat landscape a lot more activity within OT networks. So I am in a lot of discussions with different CISOs, as an example, and security leaders that have been tasked with building out an OT security program. But I don't know if it's just me, but this is kind of how I've thought of it after many of these conversations. If I look at enterprise cybersecurity in general, I always think of it as a fortified castle. We have a very good idea of how to build up the defense for the most part. I mean, of course, there's always work to be done. But in general, how to build it, how to build something quite magnificent. We have different architectures and plans. We understand what should be in the castle to make the castle function properly and so on. But when we're thinking about OT, in one of these towers of the enterprise, we can see the stairs going downstairs into a dungeon. And the dungeon has a door that's halfway open, and there's light coming through, but we don't really know what's in there. And this is a trend that I run into time and time again, that we have these OT networks, but for the most part, I would say 75% of the conversations I have, there is little to no visibility what is actually happening in these networks, what is even in there, as an example. But what we do see is that IT and OT, they are converging, right? So there is a lot of digital transformation strategies that are being implemented, where there's new technologies coming. I look at things like Siemens MindSphere as an example, where they want to start being able to pull a lot of sensor data from these OT networks, because it really makes sense when we can bring the sensor data up into the cloud and we can start using big data analytics to drive large-scale optimization. It really brings more efficient operations, which of course, when we have cost savings there, increases revenue and so on. So there's a lot of strategies to reap there. But if we think of the dungeon analogy, right, what this really means is that there's more staircases and more half-open doors coming into this dark area. There's more ways to go in, but we still don't really know what's in there. And how can we protect something that is dark? So Gartner uses a lot of, they create a lot of forecasting and so on. They come out with different predictions. And one that they've come out with is that they believe that through 2025, 30% of critical infrastructure organizations will actually experience such an impactful breach that mission critical cyber physical systems will be halted. And what we see is that when there is cybersecurity incidents in OT networks, especially critical infrastructure, It has real world consequences, possibly even deadly in some cases. So for us, the way we tend to think of this now is that OT security monitoring is no longer optional. It is something that has to be thought about and taken into account as part of an entire enterprise security strategy. So when we started getting into this was about 5 years ago. Some of the organizations we were working with had a very forward-thinking approach. They were already running quite mature programs on the IT side with managed detection response and excellent incident handling processes and so on. But they also realized that they have these OT networks where there is little to no monitoring, there is little to no visibility. How can we combine them into more of a holistic, efficient security program? So one of these organizations that we worked with was BW Offshore, and we have a public case study available for this, where this is a client we've worked with for a long time to be able to do this unified managed detection and response program. So we've learned a lot over these years as we've expanded our MDR service into the OT side, and we've built out functionality. And we've kind of distilled this down into something that is hopefully quite easy to understand. It can provide a roadmap so that if you are part of one of these organizations that doesn't currently have that kind of visibility, this is a roadmap that can be followed, a 3-step process to get you to that maturity level that you desire and that is required nowadays. And this is what that looks like. So we start at step 1, where we just evaluate the current situation, all the way through to step 3, where we are bringing in a unified MDR or security monitoring program across both IT and OT. But if we start at step 1, really evaluating the current situation, the idea, if you want to be able to do proper security monitoring, set up proper defense, we need to first have visibility, right? We need to be able to make an asset inventory. We need to understand the network architecture, actually be able to understand network communications that are happening, do initial vulnerability assessment. So when we are mapping the different assets, actually starting to see what CVEs are present, what vulnerabilities are known for different versions that are running in that environment. And then how you do vulnerability management in an OT network is very, very different from how you do on the IT side. So in OT, we're very much concerned with availability. Everything should be running continuously. That is how operations work, right? So we need to take more of a risk-based prioritization of understanding which vulnerabilities that are going to be part of this patching process. Step 2 is about, now that we have built this visibility, to actually create something we call a defensible architecture. This is that security foundation and providing a threat readiness. So this is bringing in things like access control. This is typical network security stuff, right? Starting to look at segmentation. So what is often a flat architecture turns into actual something defensible. Start working with that risk-based vulnerability management, but also starting to define different policies and procedures, especially around incident handling, incident response, and so on. When that defensible architecture has been built up, is then the next step to bring security monitoring. First for that OT architecture, but then expanding that to the IT side, which is for us vitally important, because when you're looking at the threat landscape for OT, what we see continuously is that many sophisticated threat actors, they are making initial access through the IT side to actually be able to move laterally to like the IT OT DMZ, where they then conduct the attacks against the OT side. We see this, for instance, with pipe dream malware. The bunch of research came out about 1.5 years ago about this new modular exploitation framework. It's the 7th of its kind, specifically for targeting OT systems. And within this is modules specifically for conducting lateral movement on the IT side. So this is the roadmap. But if we start at step one, how do you protect a network with no visibility? So here we have the Purdue model on the right-hand side. This is a model that is often used in the OT world. What we know is that OT networks, they are very insecure and they lack visibility, mostly by design and consequence of how they've been built and the legacy systems that are running, that have been set up specifically to provide or ensure availability. It's often things like flat architecture. We see weak authentication, often default credentials still being used in many cases. Little to no encryption, but where there is no encryption, there's a large number of proprietary and often very obscure protocols being used that need to be understood. Outdated operating systems, often we hear Windows XP and even younger. And of course, there's no patching. So how do you get visibility in this network? So when we started this journey, we were looking at who were the leaders in this area. Who could we work with to help to actually be able to understand these different protocols, for instance? So what we see is that there's likely 500 or more proprietary protocols being used in OT networks, and you need to be able to make sense of this in order to actually understand what's going on. So the more we dug into it, we really saw that Clarity, above and beyond the others, was the true market leader in this area, providing excellent visibility. They have the ability to understand over 450 of these different protocols, for instance. They provide phenomenal threat detection capability, but also understanding how to create up asset management, asset inventory, understanding network communications in the OT side, and so on. So this is a company that we've worked closely with since that time to be able to integrate into our platform and be able to provide an extension into the OT network. So if we look at an idealized scenario, for example, of a generic OT network and focusing on how this kind of a sensor would work. So here we have the Purdue model again. Here it's been filled in. But to bring that visibility, what we're going to do is in a generic fashion is we're going to set up sensors throughout the network that are going to do passive monitoring on something like a span port, where they're actually going to be able to study the traffic that is coming through, and from that begin to make sense and to start building up this asset inventory. This is going to communicate back to something like a management console. There's a few different products, so this is just a generic overview. And from here, this kind of passive monitoring through on these sensors, we're going to get full asset visibility, network visibility, actually understand the different network communication paths, process visibility, that initial vulnerability information, understanding and actually matching to different versions that are running of different types of devices and software and so on. And that initial risk-based prioritization. So we now have visibility. We've set up something such as this sensor, a different type of OT IDS sensor that is giving this basic visibility into the network. Now we're going to build the security foundation. Step 2, start working towards that true defensible architecture. So we're going from, now we've set up this initial sensor network. Next thing that we're going to want to think about is access control. And this is something that we see very common in OT networks when we first set up security monitoring, where their access control through something as a secure remote access hasn't been set up yet, is that we're often finding third-party workers that should be working in the environment that have set up remote access into the environment in ways that is maybe not always authorized. So we tend to really focus when building the security foundation on making sure that we have access control in place so that everybody that needs to come into the environment is doing it through a central place that can be monitored. We can have a good understanding of in-session visibility and also be able to disconnect sessions and provide some kind of a response. So the next thing that we would want to do is also look at upgrading the firewalls. So instead of just a regular firewall, we would want to move something towards something such as a next generation firewall, something that is going to be able to allow us with that setting up the different segmentation, but also to provide additional threat detection capability. So this provides a really nice base foundation of a defensible architecture for an OT network between something such as an OT IDS sensor, a secure remote access, and next-gen firewalls. From here, we'll have brought in access control into the environment. We have segmentation possibilities now that we have a detailed understanding of expected network communication from the first step. We can start doing actual vulnerability management. We should have a very good understanding by this point and be able to do risk-based prioritization there. Excellent threat detection capability, including from both the OT IDS sensor, but also from the next-gen firewall, being able to get things such as packet capture to do validation. And a true defensible architecture as a foundation. So when we're looking at OT networks in general, what we found is that there's different synergies that are quite nice, but if we look specific to products to set up this defensible architecture, we've seen some really excellent synergies between Clarity and Fortinet, specifically the FortiGate Next-Gen Firewall. So Clarity, the continuous threat detection platform, they also have a SaaS offering, Xdome. They have this native integration that works with the Clarity secure remote access. It provides a bunch of enrichment information, specifically around sessions that are coming into the environment, and so on. Fortinet and Clarity have also worked together to create this joint integration between the FortiGate Next-Gen Firewall and something such as the Clarity CTD platform. So when these three are combined, it creates this super integration, I like to call it, and a really synergistic defense above and beyond anything that could be offered standalone if you just had a single solution in place. So this really extends the capabilities of all three into something above and beyond. So what we see at this point is agentless discovery of OT, IT assets and vulnerabilities. You can use threat alerting policies from Clarity to actually create firewall rules. There's possibility for creation of virtual segmentation zones based on something beyond just like an IP address. You actually get a rich tapestry of OT contextual data asset types like PLCs, HMIs, even down to vendors, models, firmware versions, and so on. You can get alerts based on OT remote user activity, including the ability to monitor the session live, and actually a response capability into the environment by being able to disconnect sessions generated by OT remote user activity. So this is a really beautiful synergy and something that we recommend as a base foundation for this defensible architecture. So then the next question becomes, when you've built up this architecture, and you're having threat detection in place, what do you do? So here's a POC that we've run with an organization we started working with over 3 months. We saw that we were bringing in about 3.7 million collected logs. And from that threat detection that had been put up in place, almost 24,000 detected alerts, vendor alerts over these 3 months. But from that, when we bring in our own platform, the Samurai platform, which we run the Samurai Managed Detection Response service on, we were able to bring that 24,000, funnel it down into about 1,700 human analyzed alerts. And from that, in those first 3 months, 14 validated incidents. And here we're not always talking about something like a nation state incident, where very often we're catching things such as third-party vendors that have set up remote access into the environment in ways that are not allowed, and so on. But this is also very important to know when you're setting up your security program and to make sure that you have a good handle on. So how do we get from that 24,000 to that 1,700, though, to actually be able to find that needle in the haystack, as we say, to actually find these incidents that are happening in real time? So I'm going to talk through that. And this has really been part of our journey. So for our managed detection and response service, we've been doing this over 23 years. We have over 200,000 straight hours of 24/7 operations. We come from the IT cybersecurity world, but here in the 5th generation of our platform, something we were going to market with called Threat Detection Enhanced, we started bringing in OT, telemetry and visibility, and actually being able to do IT/OT threat detection from a single platform. And now in the 6th generation of our platform, Samurai MDR, this is what we are doing. This is built into the core of who we are, is IT/OT through a single platform and service. We really take an intelligence-driven approach. So a big part of that funnel of getting from those 24,000 down to 1,700 human analyzed alerts is being able to look at it through the lens of an intelligence-driven detection capability. And so as a curator of our own threat intelligence, we have very unique insight that allows us to apply to the streaming telemetry that's coming in. It allows us really to find that needle in the haystack, as we say. And as we are now delivering an MDR service for several clients for both their IT and OT networks, we continue to expand our threat intelligence capability on the OT side as well, which is then beneficial to all our clients, of course. When we go beyond OT as well, and we start talking about IT/OT monitoring, for us, we are an open integrator. So visibility is really key for us and how we work. The idea is that we are bringing in telemetry, as we call it, from as many different visibility points of both the IT and OT defensible architectures into a central platform, which we are then adding our own vendor-agnostic threat detection on top. The idea being able to catch threats across multiple different security solutions and devices in many different places at the same time. And contextualize that, of course, not just from OT, but from the others. As an example, when we look at Clarity, something such as their CTD platform, it has really good base threat detection from looking for new anomalies such as new assets and suspicious traffic, catching known techniques. So looking at things such as using Snort and Yara, NID signatures, but also different types of operational behavior changes, things like configuration uploads, change modes, firmware changes. These are all indicative of possible cybersecurity incidents. On top of that, we layer something called our advanced analytics. And this is the Samurai detection engine, where we're using a lot of supervised machine learning. We have a patented way of creating behavior-based detections. This is all enriched with our own threat intelligence, and of course, correlation across all telemetry sources to actually be able to find that needle in the haystack, as we call it. And if we look from a high level of what that looks like, this is really that. So we have the platform on the bottom part here. We have the MDR service on top. So we are taking in telemetry data from the OT side, the OT sensors, the OT secure remote access as an example. Also the IT side, your proxies, EDRs, next-gen firewalls, so on. It's coming into the platform. It's undergoing our complex data processing. We're mapping this to something we call our common information model, which allows us to then do real-time detection using something we call Intel packs, as well as doing something with our Samurai hunting engine. This is batch detection and applying our threat intelligence. When we are finding threats, when an alert is being created, we are taking all the context we can, something we call alert enrichment, where we are adding everything we possibly know about this and contextualizing it, where it can then be handed to an analyst who is using event-driven threat hunting to validate, perform the investigation, to actually be able to see, is this a real cybersecurity incident? This is then being escalated to the clients, and in some cases, we're providing the response, such as on the IT side. But just to show what this kind of looks like, I'm just going to actually jump into the Samurai portal. So for the 6th generation of our platform, a step that we wanted to take is we actually make an application available to all clients of the Samurai MDR service. And this application provides an interface into the service. I don't have time, of course, this is a very short webinar to do a deep dive of the application. But what I wanted to show, is how easy the actual onboarding is, even when you're bringing from IT and OT. Because I think anyone that's coming or has worked with managed security services before, we've never been able to use the word painless. But that is something that we have really striven for with the 6th generation of our platform. That when you have set up that defensible architecture, it should then be a very straightforward process to be able to bring in security monitoring. So this is the client-facing application when we first log in. Something I'm going to want to do is to go into dark mode. Makes it easier, of course. I won't be able to go through all the features, but I wanted to go here, collectors. So the way that we bring telemetry into the platform, we use something called a collector architecture. We set up something we call local collectors in your local networks. This basically acts as a syslog receiver and allows the local collector to integrate over API into different security devices. When you first onboard to the service, you would come in here, and the first thing you're going to do is actually create a collector. So we're going to go here, set static. We're going to give the IP that we're going to give to the collector, DNS server, any proxy server, host name, and so on. Then you would simply click Create Collector. This is going to provide an ISO that you can download, and you can use any hypervisor to spin this up on. From there, we would actually see the local collector is going to show up here. And in about 15 minutes, it's going to turn green, that the local collector has actually checked into the Samurai platform. Then it would be a simple case of coming over to integrations, and we're going to create an integration. As you can see, we support a large number of different security technologies in the Samurai platform. But if we're talking specifically OT, let's say we've set up our defensible architecture. We want to integrate the Clarity continuous threat detection platform. So we click there. Let's click a local collector that we had set up. We're just going to go through. We're going to add the basic information. We have configuration guides. Everything is available in our public-facing user documentation. Very easy to follow, step-by-step config of how you would do for the Clarity device. And then we're going to click Finish. Within about 5 minutes, that Clarity security technology has now been integrated into the Samurai MDR service. The telemetry would be coming in. We would be pulling alerts over the API. Likewise, if we had set up the solution that I showed there, such as with the FortiGate next-gen firewalls, we would just go here next. Click FortiGate. We're going to go to our local collector, put in the information. Likewise, very easy to follow configuration guide on how to set that up, and so on. One thing you can see here is the API key, though. So our Samurai platform goes above and beyond something like a traditional CM, in that we actually integrate directly towards the security technologies over API as well. So we are pulling the syslog from these devices. But we are also from the API pulling alerts that are being generated along with something that we call evidence data. So in the case of a FortiGate next-gen firewall, that would mean things like packet capture. So when an alert is generated, it's saving this packet capture. And we're going to pull that and give that to our analysts to help them do the actual validation to see, is this a real security incident? For us, it provides a phenomenal capability to do that rapid validation. So that's the Samurai platform. I would always be happy to go through the rest. There's some really amazing features here, including log analysis capabilities and so on, but I'll have to save that for another day. So I'll come back here and just do a quick wrap up. So we only had 30 minutes to discuss, but I had gone through and what we've seen while helping organizations that we work with and distill that journey. We've really broken it down into 3 steps. So evaluating the current situation, building a security foundation and threat readiness, and then bringing in 24/7 security monitoring. If you found this interesting, I'll give a little teaser as well. that NTT Security, Clarity, and Fortinet, we are all going to be coming together here at our Security Operations Center in Gothenburg, Sweden on January 18th for an open house where we are going to unleash OT security. 3 partners, 3 steps, 1 event. Hope to see you all there. Thank you.